N bombs are. Oh, we're already recording. Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics. Welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, I am your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by my good friend, Pastor Josh Bertram, who is your faithful host. What's up, Josh?
Did you forget my name there for a second, Will? It kind of felt like you did.
I did. Yeah.
We've only been doing this for like almost 4 years, but you know, whatever.
Yeah. Well, today we are joined by my other good friend, Corey Nathan, who actually has a podcast show that is all the rave right now. He's making it big, going big time, making tons of money, more so than the 77 cents I just mentioned that we were making on our YouTube channel. So
you know what though?
Huh?
That's 77 cents, well earned.
That's what it is, Josh. He's big time in you, man. He's a professional.
I know, dude.
He's a content creator. You know, he's big time in you. This is how it goes.
That's right. So, Ryan's Toy Review, Mr. Beast. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I'm coming for you because my kids watch you. And now my kids will finally accept me as their duly elected father,
yes.
who is a YouTuber.
Elected.
So
it's
hey,
fake news.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Corey. This is awesome. What have you been up to these days?
2024, we're off to the races. It's been a ton of fun. We had some great guests toward the end of 2023. David Brooks was definitely one of my favorite conversations. He's one of my favorite writers and thinkers out in the public space. And we had Adam Kinzinger. We look at each other. The funny thing is we look at each other's shows and I have guest envy. I'm like, how do I get that?
Same here.
I know.
So
we feel the same way.
Yeah. We're in the same spaces, but no, that's really cool. Like to be able to get to talk to guys like Brooks, to talk to guys like Tim Alberta, who I know is came on your show. It's just such a thrill, man. Like it's such a thrill to be able to speak to people who we think are doing great work out in the public. Whether it's in faith or politics or a combo thereof, and read their work and then actually get to have a conversation with them like they're real people. It's pretty cool. So doing a little bit more of that. We have a few other shows that we deal with that are kind of interrelated, but I'm just excited. I was joking around about the 77 cents, but like that's proof of concept, man. It's symbolic, but it's more than symbolic because it's real. It's concrete. It means that someone is valuing your time and what you're contributing to the culture. So that's really exciting, man. That's great.
Yeah. And I suppose I should have started also like, what's the name of your pod?
Talking politics and religion without killing each other, but don't put the G at the end of talking or killing. Like that's way too formal. So it's talking politics and religion without killing each other.
Talking politics and religion. Can you punch each other as long as you don't kill each other?
Yeah.
That's a great question. What are the boundaries? I live firmly in the nuance and the gray area. So
Me too.
I think headlocks, hammerlocks, you bring in Ivan Putski and maybe like throw him over the back and come in with the hammer. I don't know. That's a great question.
My counselor told me yesterday that I need to practice nonviolent communication. And I thought, what does that even mean? Nonviolent? I didn't know. And then I started thinking about all the microaggressions that I've done in the last, 4 years, and I just got depressed. I'm just...
Microaggressions, this is so uncool of me to say, but like microaggressions strike me as like Jinx black magic. It's like anything I say can come under the guise of microaggressions. There's nothing I can say to that. Like, what am I supposed to say? There's so many words.
I feel like I've been microaggressed by you now.
Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to do. So I'm glad that came off. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is, one, just to kind of catch up. I suppose we could do this outside of the podcast world, but but I wanted to get sort of your unique insight on a couple different issues. Being that you and I both kind of operate in the same space, I really appreciate and value your input because you have guests on your show that, come from a wide range of different fields, expertise, beliefs, what have you. And so do we. So I wanted to kind of talk to you about, or for us all to talk about a few, I don't know, current issues that are on the docket right now. One of which is, the whole Claudine Gay situation at Harvard. Talk a little bit about the Trump and his religiosity, and and then maybe just some reflections on 2024 and the craziness that is bound to ensue. So maybe we can start first with, talking about this Claudine Gay situation. So for those that aren't tracking, she was the president at Harvard, the first African woman to be the president of that institution. She recently resigned, and there has been a flurry of different accusations about the reason behind, why she was sort of forced out, if you will. So I guess setting the stage there, what are some of your guys' initial thoughts on that situation?
Do you want to tackle that, Josh, or you want me to?
Sure. I mean, I'll throw something out there, and then you can respond. It's interesting because if I understand it correctly, a lot of this has to do, at least in the article that we kind of read in preparation for this podcast, has to do with this failure of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So it kind of feels like, at least the argument, right, was that a conservative campaign or critics they looked at her, and there's this political pressure to kind of remove her from office. And I'm wondering, do you guys feel like that's true? Is that really what's going on? That it's the boogeyman behind the where does a boogeyman hide? I guess in your closet or under your bed. But that's the boogeyman of conservative white evangelical men that have now taken down another hero. Is that what's going on? Help me understand, Will.
Yeah. So so there was a big push by conservative activist Christopher Rufo, who is not necessarily any friend of liberals or DEI, critical race theory, stuff like that. And he is pleased that she's not there anymore. I mean, I think he's quoted as saying, like, her resignation is a victory, but it's only the beginning. There are people on both sides of the political spectrum that are opining about the reason behind it. I should also add that she was accused of having plagiarized a lot of her previous work, which as the head of one of the premier educational institutions in the country, obviously, like that comes with its own set of issues. I know, like, when I was in college, I mean, there was a number of different sort of ways that professors would determine whether or not I plagiarized. And when I think my first year of college, like, I had plagiarized something because I just didn't know how to write a paper. So there's that aspect, but then but she was kind of the product of, or I shouldn't say was, it's alleged that she was a product of affirmative action, DEI, but it's really weird. Like, the left are saying that it's racially motivated to kind of push her out. Even Claudine Gay herself is basically inferring that her push out of sort of leadership is due to racism. I'm not quite there yet, and as a person of color myself, I've got some pretty strong feelings about it. I mean, I think that if she did plagiarize, I think that should be a deal breaker right away, because the students that go there would likely be kicked out if they were plagiarizing something. But as far as something being racist, it's a little bit, without having all the facts and details, it's hard to really kind of make that leap, which, folks that are on the right will probably agree with me, and my fellow brethren on the left are probably cussing me out because I haven't quite, reached that point. But yeah, what do you think, Corey?
So I think that we have a treasure trove of individuals who are not availing themselves well right now. I am no fan of Chris Rufo, but I'm also no fan of plagiarism. So I think for those of us who are engaged, I think that it is a mistake to think that just because we largely disagree with an individual and even find that person distasteful, that they're always wrong. I don't like them, therefore they are always wrong. Even in some of the ways that Rufo has brought some of these issues forward, like the way they have executed their campaign against what is the new school or something? Not new school, it's New College in Florida. I thought it was heavy-handed. I thought it was they were displaying examples of the most undemocratic tactics to take over this school, in fact, as a Burkean conservative or even a Buckleyan conservative, I thought the tactics they were using at New College were anti-conservative. That said, just because it was Chris Rufo, whether you think he's an asshole or not, he still might be correct about this issue, especially once we dig into the issue, particularly plagiarism, and it's borne out that it can't be scrubbed by your PR people as simply duplicative language. In fact, it wasn't particularly good duplicative language. You could have gone to ChatGPT and found better. We were just talking about that. But so there are a number of intertwining issues, and I think Danielle Allen had a piece not too long ago, within the last few days, I think, that really peels back the layers one by one of each intertwining issue. On DEI, I think the excesses, when we're simply doing a corporate equivalent of nut picking, bad examples of DEI, of folks who've gone to the excesses, we're doing a disservice to everyone, because the idea of working harder to have a pluralistic society and to really examine our own shortcomings of what we've overlooked individually and collectively, I think this is an important exercise of being a better nation together, being a better community together, right? So we shouldn't allow the excesses of some and the errors of some to disqualify that entire endeavor. That's a worthy endeavor. So that's one issue. Whether Miss Gay was given the job based on diversity initiatives, affirmative action, I can't say, but I think to have an overall exercise of giving someone an opportunity, giving someone a hearing that you might not otherwise have given an opportunity to, I think that's healthy. And if
no doubt,
if that individual can get the job if once they're in the door, they can get the job on their own merits, God bless them. That's awesome. That's good for everyone, right? So anyway, I'm going on a bit, but you could see that there's any number of intertwining issues here, and I think when we allow for nuance, when we allow for that person, I hate them, but they have a good point. I don't agree with that, but let me think about why specifically I don't agree with that. When we stay in that zone, I think we're in a healthier zone to grapple with these really complicated issues.
So my only actual experience with DEI, because I've worked at largely small companies and then at churches, they didn't have any DEI, requirements necessarily. And my only experience with it has been through some of my friends that work at kind of larger corporations and kind of talk about how they feel like, now again, several of these are very conservative, but one of them was not that conservative and was actually a person of color, a minority, but felt like like they looked like they were white, even though they're ethnically a minority. And so like they got treated in a way, not with the person not knowing that they were an ethnic minority, they got treated in a way that was like in this DEI training that really upset this individual. And I just don't know enough about it. Like I don't like, and maybe Will, I know that I think you've done work in this, haven't you, in your company? And you're on like a board or one of the committees that helps it. So what kind of things happen in those meetings where you guys are deciding on DEI training or whatever it is that you do? How are these decisions made? How is it determined what should be taught, how it should be taught? How are codes enforced? How is it like what I hear, this kind of draconian, nobody, if you speak against, the top people now, which like this idea that DEI is now the trend. And if you speak against this, then you're now buried under a heap of shame. And what's actually going on? Because I get stuff from all different sides, and I'd rather hear it from someone who actually is involved in it on a ground level. What's going on there?
Yeah. So like when you think of DEI, like, well, number one, I'll back up. DEI is not a new like concept. Maybe the acronym is new, and actually it's DEIA DEIA now. The A stands for accessibility. So for
Nice.
folks with disabilities or something like that. So it's not a new concept. The NAACP was heavily involved at trying to find equity amongst like different races of people. I mean, Rosa Parks was a member of the NAACP, and so that was many decades ago. So DEI is essentially kind of starting from the point of looking at the demographics of your company and just asking the question, like, does the proportion of X make sense for where we are? So like, let's say, for instance, you are, in Atlanta, Georgia, predominantly Black community, and you're running an organization, several hundred people, and 80% of them are all white. It's sort of asking the question of like, does this make sense to you? Like, and if it doesn't make sense, then why? Because maybe there could be sort of a confluence of different factors that are causing your demographic to look the way it is. It could be from the recruiting, it could be from the hiring practices. It could just be people's own personal biases, and the same thing can be said for, if you got primarily all male workforce or female or whatever, and even like if you're a Black company that only has, say one or two white people, like I would even argue that, hey, in those companies, you should also be looking at sort of the demographic of your folks. Now, I know that's somewhat risky to say because like Black-owned businesses are a thing, and it's something that people take a lot of pride in, and they should, because for I don't know how many generations, this country hasn't necessarily been all that great to people that look like myself. So, DEI is really just trying to level the playing ground, the playing field, so that way everybody kind of has a chance. It's not necessarily like, oh, that person was a DEI hire, so we're going to naturally get a lower quality of service or work out of this individual. It's like, no, it's saying, hey, like, there may be situations where we want to hire, somebody that's LGBTQ, someone that's a person of color, someone that's Native, someone that's Black, someone that's white, so I really think that people's idea of what DEI is a bit construed, and every company does it because it's like, it's a good business decision. I mean, essentially, if you want to have a closed thinking environment, you will not want to support DEI. But if you want to sort of tap into the creativity, ingenuity of, a multitude of different people, then DEI is something that you should be looking at. But also, like, the DEI term is now sort of used in the pejorative And
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies would benefit from just changing the name. It's kind of like NASA did it with UFOs, right? Like now they're UAPs, unidentified
Yes.
aerial phenomenon. It's the same thing. It's just they just call them UAPs now. So, yeah, did you have something to add?
Oh, that's okay. So if the principles are good, I think that they apply regardless of what the terms are. As a side note, I'm somewhat ambivalent about certain terms being hijacked. Our former president is really good at hijacking terms like,
No doubt.
I mean, now even evangelical is like they stole it. Like, it's a beautiful word. They stole it.
I know,
fake
man.
news, like all these different terms are conservative. They're up for debate. Anyway, that's a side conversation. What I was going to ask you, Josh, is when I walk into a church, like in our town, I don't know what the exact numbers are for Santa Clarita Valley, but I know for our district, we're as much as 30 to 35% Spanish-speaking Latino voters. But when I walk into a church and it is 95 to 99% white, then I'm thinking, man, so I actually had a thought. I did have a question for Josh, because it has to do with DEI as it relates to churches.
Sure.
I live in a district. I'm not sure about Santa Clarita Valley in particular, but our voting district is at least 30% Latino voters. And when I walk into certain churches and I see 95 to 99% white, I'm thinking, man, is this church really serving our community? So do you, as a church leader, is that something that you're cognizant of, and a part of the mission of the church is to serve the community where you are? Or is it just like, hey, as long as the butts are in the seats, we're good to go,
Well, that kind of depends on the pastor, and that depends on the pastor for sure. At the churches that I've been at, and my church, like, we really definitely highly value diversity. It's funny. We were on a call the other night, and he's like, yeah, you have, you pastor a black church. And I'm like, and then he's like, yeah, 75% of your, like 75%, and we counted, like, of your congregation would check African-American on a form. Like several of them are their parents are black and white. Right. So, but it's like, I never would have necessarily thought that wasn't necessarily my goal, but it was this thing in mind where I was like, I have to learn how to minister to people that think differently than me, that look differently than me. And not every pastor does that, for sure. Another thing that I think isn't said very often is that the style, and this is going to sound funny, but I think it makes sense. The style of worship is a huge, huge barrier in a lot of these places, because what you have found is, if you like traditional quote unquote black churches and white churches, if you go to the music is similar, but it's different. And the style is different. And people choose churches based on the style of worship. And I think that a lot of white people are uncomfortable in black church spaces because of the style, but they may not be able to express that. And if no one's asking them, if no one's challenging them, because, like, for instance, at my last church, I would say things like, man, if we are going to be diverse, we need to have more diverse music, because music is a huge part of what we do. And if every single song is, and I'm like a victim of this. I don't know, victim's not the right word. I do this, like, what's the top 10, worship songs? And I go look it up and I say, I'm just going to play the top 3, cause I'm just a pragmatic thinker in that sense. I'm like, I don't need to have my favorite songs up there. I just want to have the ones that are popular, but all the ones that are popular are mostly written by white people and sung at white churches. And I don't know why that's the case. I'm sure there can be explorations. I'm sure there have been, and good explorations, but I do know that churches are the most segregated of all of the areas of our society, almost the most segregated. And maybe it has something to do with the personal nature of worship and how we just want a certain style, or you want a certain kind of preaching and style of preaching, or you know what I mean? And so often people just get kind of stuck in those ruts because they grew up with it or whatever it is, and it's what they're most comfortable with. I would be reticent to just say that's just because all these white people are racist. Certainly there's a lot that are, but I think that it's probably a stylistic thing. But then again, that's just a gut feeling. I don't have any like real evidence to back that up. I'd have to do some research on that one.
Yeah.
To really get that,
Yeah, it's almost like what churches are more prone to say play like KJ52 versus Lecrae. And I would venture to guess KJ52 is probably played more, say before church starts, music going on in the background, then you would hear sort of like Lecrae type music. And it's really, really sad. But, kind of on that same thread, just talking about religion, I want to get your guys' thoughts on an article that I read recently. And it's something that's kind of been in the news a little bit in some circles, especially the circles that we all run in. But it's an article by the Deseret News that is titled "Most Republicans Think Donald Trump is a Person of Faith." And the article is pretty, it's shocking, but not necessarily unexpected. There are... So, they polled a number of folks. The results were, Republicans, 64% of Republicans think Donald Trump is a person of faith, versus 13% of Republicans thinking Joe Biden is a person of faith, 34% thinking Mitt Romney. And you can kind of guess on like how the numbers are switched. So when it comes to Democrats, 10% only think Donald Trump is a person of faith, and 69% of Democrats think that Joe Biden is a person of faith. So I'd love to kind of, I don't know, maybe unpack that, Josh. What are some of your initial, first thoughts about this?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this article. So bear with me. So the conclusion of the article, as I kind of understood it, is the perception of Trump as a person of faith among Republicans is more about his political stance and actions than any kind of traditional religious participation. And I would have to say, reading that and thinking about that, I would have to say that's true. I would have to say, like, it feels intuitively true to me. Like, again, and they've done these polls, and there's been a lot of polls, and polls can be, polls are you have to be careful with polls, right? Because they can kind of say, you can find the ones that say what you want them to say. They can be manipulated, all sorts of things. But I don't think that this poll is, it doesn't strike me as inaccurate, in that people, they think he's religious because of his stances on things like abortion and same-sex marriage and immigration and gun control, right? And it's like, and I really do think that that's why people would think that he's religious. He doesn't know the Bible. He misquotes everything. I mean, if you hear the guy, before, and I know this has been years and years, but I'll never forget when he said, "I don't need forgiveness." Mm-hmm. It's like, wait, forgiveness is at the heart of the gospel, that everyone needs forgiveness, right? And we got Donald Trump, this guy that's, I don't know, I could go on and on, but I don't know what his faith stance is. I really don't know. But if I had to judge it from his words and his actions and all these things as a whole, I would say I don't think the guy is that religious. Now, what does that matter, what I think about Donald Trump? I don't think it matters all that much, except to say that, like, yeah, it doesn't seem like the guy, he's just trying to he's found a people that will support him because he will fight for them. And coming from very conservative roots, coming from very conservative ideology that I basically took hook, line, and sinker most of my life. I've questioned it more now, but definitely feel myself very much a conservative. Coming from that stance, I can understand why you would like Donald Trump, because you want someone who's going to fight for you. And over the last, whether true or not, over the last 15 years, whatever, I really sensed it and felt it during the Obama years, because of just the circles that I ran in. It was the first real president that that I was really following and involved in, and looking at what was happening. And I just would listen to so many conservative publications and syndicate radio stations and all these things. And it would just be blasting this guy because of how bad he is and how he's taking the whole country basically to hell in a handbasket. And I just saw it. I saw friends cry when he got reelected because they were afraid. Existential fear.
You're talking about people crying when Obama got reelected.
Obama
right?
got elected. Yeah. And people crying when Trump got elected. And I experienced both. And I'm like, man, like there was this backlash, I think, from people who are like, man, we just saw what happened with Obama. Same-sex marriage became legalized. So many things happened. He put these people, very liberal people, in the Supreme Court. Whatever you want to say about that, but and there's this backlash. Totally, that's what I think. It was like people got scared. A bunch of Christians got scared. Evangelical Christians. Trump knew that he could get them, because if you can control people's fears, you can control them, dude. If you find out what someone's afraid of, you can control them. I promise you. And people, evangelical white Christians, are afraid of liberals, and they're afraid of of where the country is going and what's going to happen to them and their faith and their children and all that stuff. It's fear. And that is exactly what is happening. And it's what I'm trying to kind of prevent in my own heart, like, of just being afraid and making choices out of fear. Because unless you're getting attacked by a tiger and you need to make a quick choice to run away, it's normally not a great idea to make choices out of fear, in my opinion.
Well, what do you think, Corey? I mean, do you think that people consider Trump a person of faith because he allowed us to say Merry Christmas again?
Oh man, talk about trigger warnings. So I have two separate reactions to this poll. This article that summarizes the poll. One is, I need to remember to react to the findings objectively on their own merits. Yeah, to your point, Josh, like, look, it's a relatively small sampling. It's only about 1,000 people that they polled. They give themselves a decent error margin of about 3+%. So take it for what it's worth. But the tendency is to read information like that and start to argue with the facts that you're seeing because you disagree with the findings. I don't think that's a very productive way to process the information. I think it's worthwhile to process the information, but then if I'm in a conversation, whether it's with somebody like you, Josh, or one of my friends from church, when you're talking to someone who holds these views that the poll reflects, then that's a different conversation. So I was thinking before, like, the first step is just admitting it. Like, the first step is just reckoning with the facts on the ground. These are the facts. So what is that all about? Now, once I reckon with that, and once I understand, if I'm having an individual conversation and I understand their perspective, then I can start to uncover, well, why is that? Let's take it from the fear perspective that you talked about, Josh. You're afraid of liberals. Why is that? Well, they want to do this. Well, who's they? What are we talking about here? Can you tell me a policy, specific policy? Can you tell me a specific person? Oh, Biden, he's trying to pack the courts and he's trying to make Puerto Rico a state. And well, has he yet? Or what has the Biden administration actually done? Not to argue, but just like to, why? Why is that? Why do you feel that way? What specific policies are we talking
Dig
about?
a little deeper.
Yeah, to dig a little deeper. Part of it is just to get the person to question their own assumptions and to unpack their own fears, if you will, to see, well, maybe I shouldn't be that afraid about that. A lot of our inclination is to get competitive, to get contentious, right? Is to say, no, that's wrong because X, Y, and Z. Even when I'm reading actual objective information, facts, right? As opposed to relating to it, or when we're talking to a person who holds the views that are reflected in that poll, to relate to them, as opposed to contending with them and trying to shoot them down and throw rhetorical bombs their way, to actually just, okay, why is that? Why do you feel that way? Oh, that's interesting. So what happened? Like, tell me about your life. Like, how did you arrive at that position in the first place? You know, and then it becomes about a relationship and not about a contest. And I think if we have a relationship, ironically, we're on much more fertile ground to actually tackle some of the subjects, right? So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With this particular article, I actually have some issues with it. Not necessarily the findings, because I think the findings sort of comport with at least my own personal biases and what I feel, about Christians and sort of their allegiance to Trump. But it's more or less the sense that they asked the question, because in my opinion, I just feel like it's not helpful with sort of the current conversation that we're having, especially as it pertains to Christian nationalism and how Trump is sort of connected to it and so on and so forth. So I think that the poll does a disservice to the larger conversation about the role of religion in the political sphere, because now it's like, it's like, who here thinks Trump is a person of faith or a Christian? And then other, Christians are going to say, oh yeah, see, like most people think that he's a person of faith. And then Trump is probably going to jump on the bandwagon and be like, yeah, look, most Republicans think I'm a person of faith. And then that sort of becomes the standard of which a person is deemed a person of faith, like through a poll. And I just don't think it's necessarily, like I said, all that helpful. What were you going to say, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if, all the people around me think I'm a person of faith, if I don't have any faith, whatever, I am because they think I am, right?
It's collective illusions.
Well, because here's, and I've harped on this before, but I seriously feel like if someone is confused as to why evangelicals love Donald Trump, and I feel confused sometimes too, but if they're confused, I honestly think it comes down to the fact that he is perceived, whether it's true or not, he is perceived as a defender of Christianity in both the people he chooses, the policies he tries to enact, and the rhetoric he uses. It's like, so I got a theory. And I think you guys will like this. I got a theory about why when Rob Bell came out with a book that Love Wins, nothing made evangelicals more angry than the idea that love wins, ultimately. No, and I know I'm saying that a little bit tongue in cheek, because this is not the place to debate the merits of hell. We can do that on another podcast. I'd love to do that, actually, and look at it and see. But that's not. But my point in all this is that, so I think people a lot of times they don't want to not believe in hell because they can't imagine how is it that other person can do whatever they want and get away with it. That's not fair. I should be able to do whatever I want, but I can't because I'm hung by this idea that I have to obey God. And again, I'm not saying that that's everyone's view. That obviously, in my opinion, is not a good view because it's a very selfish view, I think. But I think what happens is the connection there is that people are upset and they want to defend Donald Trump because he actually defends them. they perceive that he defends them, and he's saying things that they aren't allowed to say. And they love that. They love that he can go and say things, whatever it is that he wants. And it's almost like there's this projection onto Donald Trump. He gets to say the things that I always want to say, but I'm too not. Of course, there are people that say nasty things. I'm not saying that, but most of the people that I know, they wouldn't want to offend another person. They don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. They don't want to drive someone else away, but they love that Donald Trump will get up there and go to bat and go fisticuffs with the quote unquote liberals. I honestly feel like that's a huge reason of understanding why evangelicals, by and large, love Donald Trump.
And I think he knew that. I think if I give him credit for anything, I think give him and his campaign credit. In 2020, the slogan was, he's fighting for us, right? And now he launched his campaign, I am your retribution, right? But I think that is it's a sociological disease, for lack of a better word. It's a sociological disease that many of our neighbors even feel like we need to have somebody fighting for us, you know?
Yes.
But we've had since 1987, probably longer than that, but I'm dating it back to when Rush Limbaugh started. We've had this cultural training of the left wants you to, the left is trying to, the left, like defining by mischaracterizing, generalizing, and demonizing. And now it's not just Fox News and Rush Limbaugh, or, you know, may he rest in peace, whatever my differences with him are, but like a whole industry, an entire industry, you know, that has built upon exactly what you're saying, understands that our brains react to fear and anger the same way that our brains react to crack. That there's this hit that we get, that now not only are we addicted to it, so we have to pursue it more and more, but then it becomes sort of the defining thought pattern of our life, right? So that's why I say the only thing I think that could cure that is it's not even legislation. You know, it's relationship, it's conversation, it's, you know, and that ain't sexy, because I can't, you know, even if my guy gets elected next time, whether it's at the state, local level, or at the federal level, even if they get elected, like, that's not the answer, as we've seen over the last three years. That's not the answer. The answer is I think it's sexy, but it's not. Maybe it doesn't look, but to me, it's incredibly profound, because it's just one conversation with my neighbor that I know I disagree with about guns, that I know I disagree with about abortion, that I know I disagree with about, I don't know, bipartisan infrastructure, although we'll probably never get to that because that's actual legislation. You know what I mean? So
no, I totally am picking up what you're putting down, because I mean, and I think it's one of the things I really enjoy about doing this podcast in particular, because of all the guests that we've had on, I can honestly say we've had a lot of guests on that I would vehemently disagree with. Their views, their
for sure
organization, you know, and I think the same probably holds true for Josh as well. You know,
for sure.
We like talking to people that we don't necessarily see eye to eye with. I mean, and you know, in an episode that we're going to be releasing here in a couple of weeks, we spoke with the co-founder of the Satanic Temple. You know, and he has an organization that I'm not necessarily, you know, going to line up and sign up to become a member or anything, but it was nice just having him on, just talking to him, you know, and you know, I even at the end of the conversation, I even wished him well, and you know, hope that he increase his membership.
I pray that your converts increase.
Hey, so it's for listeners who are listening on the TPNR feed. This is very true. In fact, you guys had on the organizer. What is that tour that goes around to churches and creates these events? The Reawaken tour. And Tim Alberta wrote about that extensively in his latest book, The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. So you had that dude on, but I was just talking to Greg Lukianoff from FIRE, Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression, and he shared a story that one of his mentors said, I want to know who the Nazis in the room are. I'm not saying that dude's a Nazi, but to your point about like putting somebody on who you vehemently disagree with, the way to advance our collective understanding is not to suppress speech. It is to have better speech, have better dialogue. I just love it. I want to know who the Nazis in the room are. I'd rather not be, wondering.
I want to make this point though. I think the same thing that people think about Donald Trump, I think a lot of Christians, they want to think and feel about God in this way. They feel like they can't punish the evildoer, but they want God to punish the evildoer, right? So they can wipe their hands clean. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Totally understand. The Christian version, and I suffer from this desire as well. The Christian version of what goes around comes around. I just want to see it come around.
Yes.
So
I want to see God fry that dude.
Yeah.
And think about that attitude, though, dude.
It's a certain form of idolatry. That's what it is.
Yes.
It's a certain form of idolatry. We're putting other things in the place of God, or instead of gazing on God and casting our wonder toward God, our gaze is on our enemy, or who we perceive to be our enemy.
Yes.
That, in an ironic way, becomes our idol, right? Because it's the compass by which we orient ourselves for everything else. Our worship, our political activity, what bumper stickers we're putting on our car, how we're just so much of our day-to-day lives is our disposition is around this compass that's pointing toward,
yes,
who we think our enemy is. So it's preach, man.
It's an interesting psychology, because I really feel like so many, like there's this hidden, it's like it's like we've sanctified this holy war kind of attitude, but we want to keep ourselves. It's the same. It's the same kind of thing where I want to be careful. It's like we like when someone else does our dirty work. A lot of folks who identify as Christians, they'd be like texting Jesus, and Jesus be like, New Testament, who dis? I mean, seriously, I have just had those kinds of conversations so many times, and it's like, you got people that are super religious, and the whole like religion versus relationship thing, I think that can get a little wonky sometimes, because there are good things about religion, and the Bible, the Bible, those aren't necessarily biblical categories where the Bible is like religion is horrible and all this stuff, because there's parts of religion, right, the ritual and things like that are good. But I do think that religious pharisaic attitude that begins to see people in binary ways.
Yeah.
It's
dehumanizing.
And I think Jesus brought the nuance, honestly.
Right.
I feel like he made it so we can actually look at someone and see nuance, as opposed to, the Old Testament, violence in the Old Testament, the things that God commanded, that's a topic for another day. I'd love to jump into that on another day. We should like plan a few of these things where we can just start talking about some of this stuff. But it's just the whole idea, though, is that if Jesus is the perfect image of God, right? And in the previous days, God spoke to us through our forefathers, right? In various times and in various ways. But in these last days, what has he done? He's spoken to us through his son. And it's like, so whatever the differences are that we see, you got to look at Christ to understand what that means. And one of my favorite preachers, who happens to be my cousin, a guy named Greg Ford, I love how he said Jesus is perfect theology. And I know that you can come in and you can, nitpick that and all that kind of stuff. But I think the point is well made, that when we want to have theology and understand what God and who God is, we need to look to Jesus, who said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, who gave himself willingly to be killed. And I just think we don't actually believe that love really will win. And we don't believe that love will actually conquer. We don't believe that. We don't believe it. We still think like Romans, or we still think like Egyptians. I'm preaching too much, but I see this a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm gonna be quiet for now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe that's your next sermon. Well, probably not, because you want to be mindful of the Johnson Amendment, and all that nonsense. But
yes,
so,
I thought we got rid of the Johnson Amendment.
Well,
didn't Trump get rid of that?
He promised to get rid of it, but we're still stuck with it. Right. So although the FBI isn't necessarily jump through any hoops to prosecute people who violate it, because there's a whole litany of violations they could choose from. But so I want to kind of start closing us out by talking about 2024 and the election cycle. So we
could do that in 30 seconds or less, man.
Yeah. Let's do it. We're 300-ish days away from the general election, where
I can't believe that
we will have either a new president or maintain the same one. So, what are your hot takes, Corey, on this year's elections and all the stuff?
So my hot take is that I don't necessarily concede those are our only choices. So I still believe so we're recording this prior to even the first primary. I still do not believe, even if we go through the primary process, I'm still not convinced. I'm not saying it's going to happen or it's even likely to happen, but I think there's at least an inside straight level of possibility that we'll have at least one different nominee than Trump and or Biden. So Nikki Haley, for example, can pull that inside straight. She has as much of a chance of being the Republican nominee right now as Trump had of winning the election in 2016, which is about an inside straight. Yeah, that's what I think. And there's any number of factors that could lead to that. It could either go through the primary process where she could win. Again, I don't think it's a likelihood, but I think there is a path to it. And I've seen crazier things happen. We've all seen crazier things happen. So there is a path to it. There also could be a health event. Look, the main candidates, the prominent candidates, the number one candidates in both the major parties are pretty up there in age. It's not crazy to say one of them, if not both of them, might have some sort of health event that would mitigate the possibility of them continuing as their party's candidate. So there is that. So I want to push back on that. That's my first thought. What was the context? What was the bigger question?
Yeah. So just what are some things that you're either looking forward to seeing or very skeptical and nervous about these candidates as they ramp up their rhetoric?
Yeah. So I'm trying not to get too caught up in the polls that are coming out today. I think that there's any number of qualitative reasoning underneath the polls that we're seeing. I believe in the efficacy of at least certain polls. Some of them are garbage, but there's a number of them that I've come to really appreciate and respect if you're looking at them for what they're supposed to be used for and have the frame, the context, taking in a margin of error, for example. So that said, I also think that there's reasoning underneath those polls. So I'm trying not to get too crazy about what we're seeing right now, because you could tease out any number of situations, and we all need therapy as it is, let alone trying to tease out all these different scenarios that could play out. I'll start looking a lot more closely over the summer, partly because a bigger percentage of our voting public will be paying closer attention. Unlike us, a vast majority of people aren't really paying that close attention. They don't know what Donald Trump said about the Civil War and that he could have negotiated. He could have, avoided the Civil War with a negotiation. Most people don't know that that's what he said just on Saturday. Like, I could go through a litany of things he said so I pay attention to that nonsense, but most people aren't. And I'm curious to see what folks are thinking, especially where it counts. Like California, hate to say it, my vote for president is empty calories. New York, empty calories. Florida, at this point, a lot of folks think it's still purple. It ain't purple. It's red. It's empty calories what they're voting for president. So what I'm curious about is, what are people thinking in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Minnesota, Nevada? That's what I'm curious. But not until the summer. That's when I'll start paying closer attention. And if folks are still leaning very much in favor of Trump the way we're seeing now, frankly, I'll start getting nervous, guy. I think it's much more cataclysmic. Our institutions have been weakened. They bent, but they didn't break, but they bent, So I believe in our institutions, especially our judiciary. But I am, anyway, I'm not going to get that far down the road but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I think Nikki Haley has probably more than a better chance of becoming president. Even despite if she doesn't get the nomination, she won't necessarily be the R on the ticket. But I do think that there are going to be a lot of Democrats that will vote for her in the primary, because if nothing else, I think Democrats are idealistic, and we would still like to see a woman president, even if it's Nikki Haley. And the fact that Nikki Haley has taken somewhat of a nuanced, stance on abortion. A lot of it is probably just she's trying to kind of play both sides at this time, but I think that she has a real shot at beating Biden, probably more so than Trump does. That's just my own personal opinion. I think if given the option of Trump and Biden, people are going to come out to the polls because they don't want Trump. But they'll probably still end up voting, R for Congress. And you'll have kind of a similar mix as we did when Biden first got elected. So, I'm real nervous personally, just because, Trump, whenever he's backed into a corner, seems to lash out even more. And the fact that he's got all these different criminal court cases coming up, and then especially if he lost, I think that all hell's going to break loose. I was listening to advisory opinions just this morning, and they were talking about like the Supreme Court intervening, in Trump's immunity case and whatnot, and how different it would be if it was like Trump v. Bush versus Gore, like how that situation would have played out. Like we all remember the Bush v. Gore, and obviously there were people that were upset, but there weren't rioting on the streets. There are a lot of like really staunchly worded op-eds that were written. But if it was like a Bush v. Trump, things would have gotten really, really bad. Ostensibly another Jan 6 event. So, yeah. What do you think, Josh?
Well, there's a couple things, actually. The first thing is that I think it's a real opportunity for us and our two podcasts to really like take advantage and be voices of reason, and in a very tumultuous time. I think people are going to be tired, exhausted of the rhetoric, and they're going to want some kind of reasonable conversation. And so I think that will give a platform, and I'm praying and hoping, to both our podcasts and podcasts like this that can be voices of reason. The second thing is, I'm very concerned about Christian nationalism. I'm very concerned about major denominations and how they have not taken stances that I feel like they should take on this issue. I'm very concerned. I mean, Donald Trump started saying the only way that I'll lose is if it's stolen, right? He already said that. I mean, he was saying that like 6 months or whatever before the election.
Right.
And he knew from that point, if he lost, he was gonna do exactly what he did. That's what I think. He started saying it right from the beginning. He's not any different. He's gonna keep doing the same tactics. And I mean, I don't want anyone to do anything illegal. I want the right processes, but I am just praying. I don't know what I'm praying for. Honestly, I'm praying for God's will. I think, I hope, maybe I don't know. I know I should sound more sure as a pastor, but I'm just like, I just praying that God's will is not that we have either of the candidates that we currently have. But I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. And I think, I'm concerned. I'm concerned. I've heard too much from too many people that know what they're talking about to just feel like, oh, it's just business as usual. And so I'm concerned, but again, I don't want to live in fear. So I want to try to be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And so I think there's a real opportunity, Corey, for us and you and podcasts like ours to really take our place where it needs to be. So that's kind of what I think.
That's really cool. Well, great. So Corey, not like, we need to inform our audience, but just for the small few watchers or listeners that aren't already subscribed to your podcasts, when do you guys air your episodes?
We've been coming out on Tuesday nights. I'm trying to get it back to even earlier in the week, Sunday night or Monday night. Yeah. So, do you want me to share how people can find me? I don't know.
Yeah. Please do. Yeah.
So typically it's been Tuesday nights the last stretch here, but we're pretty easy to find on all the podcast apps. Just when you're spelling Talkin' Politics and Religion without killing each other, do the Talkin' without the G, Talkin' apostrophe Politics and Religion without killing each other, and we're up on all the apps. But it's easy. Go to our website, politicsandreligion.us. So www.politicsandreligion.us, or you can find me on all the socials, at Corey S. Nathan. So Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you're typing in the name of your podcast, if you have more than one G in your podcast description, you've spelt it wrong.
Exactly.
I was doing the math. I was like, Talkin', okay, no G in apology religion, but there is a G in religion. So
yeah, that's right.
That should be your only G. Well, hey, Corey, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming by. Apologize for any of the technical issues. Hopefully,
thank you.
We'll be able to clean it up nice in post-production.
For what it's worth, that's what Lisa was interrupting about. Lisa has a internet dude come in so that I can get my own little thing here. So we're not thieving off of the houses, But hey, so before we go, so people on our feed can know how to find you. I know a lot of our folks are already listening to your show. How can folks follow you guys?
Yeah, so we release episodes twice a week. So Tuesdays also. Apparently Tuesdays sort of the main day for religion, political podcasts out there. We also release on Saturday, and people can find us pretty easily. Faithful Politics podcasts. You can go to our website. It's just faithfulpolitics.us. And I mean, I guess you can put the www in front. I don't know, like, people still say that, and I don't really quite understand why. Because that's.
I've noticed that when I don't put in politics and the www, sometimes it doesn't work. So like, I don't know why that is. Because that's what I'm going to benefit from working with this digital dude on the new show. So.
Yeah, I'm like all of us, we've been World Wide Webbing for long enough, right? That
Yeah.
should be implied that we don't need to say that. So yeah, faithfulpolitics.us. And, be on the lookout. We are coming out with a 5-part audio documentary narrative about Christian nationalism. It's designed to really kind of provide sort of a brief glimpse of Christian nationalism and all of its components. The first episode will be about this idea that America was founded as a Christian nation. The second episode is all about, the church-state separation. The third episode is all about the unfortunate misuses of religion and the Bible to oppress Native and African Americans. The fourth is all about Trump. So the evangelical relationship with Trump. And then the fifth episode is really focused on, making the argument that not all Christians are crazy. So I'm probably a little bit more concerned about the last episode because I feel like if you listen to the first 4, you're thinking, boy, those Christians are really out there. So the fifth episode is sort of designed to hopefully combat maybe some of those misperceptions. So
yes.
Yeah. And anything you want to add, Josh, before we sign off?
No, just thankful to be a part of all this.
Awesome. Well, if you've made it this far in the episode, thank you so much for stopping by. And make sure you keep your conversations not right, not left, but up. And we'll see you next time. Take care.